Hello boys, hello girls, hello babes. Welcome back to the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And also, as always, we would like to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast if you're enjoying your time here. We had a ton of new subscriptions after our last episode, the episode where we were talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois joining the Caps. And so that is always so great to see, because when people click subscribe as a content creator, it probably means that you're doing something right? Like, it lets me know at the very least that you guys are at least somewhat enjoying these episodes. And so that is always so great to know. Like, that makes me feel pretty dang good. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, to those who have already subscribed and to those who are just listening now. Maybe this is your first episode that you're here with us. Maybe you're just discovering our show now. But regardless, however long you have been here with us, we appreciate each and every single one of our listeners just the same, which is to say a lot. We appreciate you guys a lot. We really do. And we would love to have you all along here with us for the long haul. So please, if you haven't already done so, like I said, do take a moment and click on that subscribe button if you are feeling so inclined. All right, now that little piece of business is out of the way, babes, we have got a ton to talk about today, as it has been a very busy offseason for our Washington Capitals so far, who at this point have turned over about 1/3 of their lineup from last season. 5 players from last season's roster are out, and 7 new players are in through a combination of trades and free agency here to start this offseason off with a major bang, like I said, for our Washington Capitals. And the wide consensus here is that it has been a pretty successful bang at that. As you know, whether you're looking at the mainstream media's opinions, more local media's opinions, or Capitals fans' opinions, I think everyone pretty much agrees, like I said, that this has been a pretty successful offseason so far for the Washington Capitals, as these have not just been some, kind of off-brand, no-name players who the Caps are bringing in here. These are very good players that they've added to their roster over these last few weeks. And so we will get into all of that, as well as closer to the end of the episode, we will touch quickly on the front office restructuring that the Caps have just done here. A few different people earning promotions, as well as a few other quick things as well. Again, that'll be closer to the end of the episode. So first up, though, like I said, we are going to talk about the additions, players-wise, that the Caps have made to their roster here. So all in all, it's going to be, like I said, a pretty jam-packed episode for you all here today, which is an exciting thing when we're talking about the offseason. The offseason sometimes, for a lot of teams, it can be a little bit slow, and obviously as a content creator, that's not exactly what you want. So we are very happy to have so much happening for our Washington Capitals and to be able to bring you, like I said, a jam-packed episode here today. With the main event, of course, like I said, being those players that the Caps are bringing in as we look ahead to this upcoming season. So let's dive right into it. And first things first, right? I'm just going to list off all of the moves that the Caps have made so far this offseason. For anyone who may have had their head in the sand or their butt on a beach somewhere for the last couple of weeks. And, if you did, great for you, but you missed a lot when it comes to the Washington Capitals. So, let's get you caught up because obviously, summer, people have lots of things going on. And, hey, like if you had your head in the sand or your butt on a beach somewhere for the last couple of weeks, like I said, then I do not blame you, as the weather is gorgeous out there right now. But we do want to just start off here by listing off those moves first for anyone, like I said, who may have missed it, just so that we make sure that everybody's all caught up here. And I will try not to miss anything myself because there has been so many moves. And, I too like sand and beaches. So there's a lot to digest here, a lot to break down, and like I said, pretty much all of it has been good for the Washington Capitals. So first, okay, as we know, and as we already chatted about at length on our last episode before this one, the Caps make their first trade of the offseason, shipping off disappointing goaltender Darcy Kuemper and his $5.25 million cap hit to the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for 25-year-old center Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, if you missed our last episode, okay, and you want to hear more about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, I do encourage you to check that episode out. Not to self-promote here, but it has got a ton of content in that episode there. And since we did already cover this move so extensively for the Caps, we won't be getting into this one too much on today's show, the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, that is, just because, like I said, we already talked about it at length on our previous episode. So check out that previous episode of ours if you do want to hear more about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, because for this episode, like I said, we've got just more than enough other things to talk about, frankly. So, okay. So, after the Darcy Kuemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois 1-for-1 swap, whoo baby, your Washington Capitals were just getting started, as it turns out. They then trade for Calgary Flames forward Andrew Mangiapane, sending a second-round draft pick in 2025 back to the Calgary Flames for him. That is an absolute steal for Brian MacLellan and the Washington Capitals. And then on the morning of day 2 of the draft, the Caps clearly saw a player that they really liked still sitting available on the draft board during round number 2 of the draft, because while they already had a second round pick coming up in just a little bit, the pick that they had wasn't until pick number 52. And they clearly felt that, whatever player it was who was still sitting there and who they were targeting, obviously, they clearly felt that player was not still going to be available by the time that they got to that pick number 52. And so they trade fourth line left wing Beck Mallenstein to the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for pick number 43. And they used that pick to select defenseman Cole Hutson from the U.S. National Team Development Program. Now, Cole Hutson is a hell of a grab, quite frankly, for the Washington Capitals in the second round. I love the pick. He is definitely a first-round talent. And in fact, overall, once again, the Caps had a very, very strong draft here. And we won't really have time to get into all of that draft stuff today, just because there were so many moves in regards to the Capitals NHL roster that we're going to cover here today. But yeah, once again, they make out like absolute bandits at the draft. And the future for this organization remains very, very bright. So just to do kind of a quick recap here of the Caps 2024 draft, like I said, a quick recap, so we're not going to go in depth here, but in the first round, okay, they snag a forward, Tarik Periskak, with the 17th overall pick. Tarik Periskak, who was so good in his rookie season in the CHL this season that he was quite literally dubbed with the nickname Super Rookie. So you're doing pretty well if you get a nickname like that, right? He was smashing CHL records left and right and hitting scoring totals not seen since the likes of Sidney Crosby and Patrick Kane when they were in their junior days. So that is obviously pretty high company, and that's a pretty good sign if you're a Capitals fan here. And then in the second round, like I talked about, they made the trade to get the 43rd overall pick so that they could take Cole Hutson. And then they took another defenseman, Leon Muggley, with the 52nd overall pick. And for what it's worth, which it should probably be worth a lot, because these guys are usually right, I am seeing that most of the scouts out there are naming both Cole Hutson and Leon Muggley as two of their steals of this 2024 NHL draft. So that is another very good sign, like I said, if you are a Capitals fan. And then also of note, I wanted to mention this as well, in the third round, the Caps traded up in order to be able to select Ilya Protas, the younger brother, of course, of current Capitals forward Alexei Protas, who just this past season signed a 5-year contract extension with our Washington Capitals. So Little Pro, as he called himself while introducing himself to Caps fans after the draft via the Washington Capitals official social media channels, He seems to be a lot like his older brother Alexei in the sense that he is a behemoth of a forward who can also skate like the wind and play both sides of the puck very well. So that should be a welcome thing to hear, for all Caps fans, as obviously we love his older brother, Big Pro, right? So those are some of the highlights from this year's draft for the Washington Capitals, but we will get into this more in depth on a future episode. As like I said, today's episode is primarily focusing on the current NHL roster of the Washington Capitals. But yeah, so they trade Beck Malenstein to Buffalo. Sorry to Beck Malenstein for that one. You truly deserved a better fate than the Sabres organization, but what can you do? And then the Caps trade a third-round draft pick in 2024 and a third-round draft pick in 2025 to Las Vegas for Logan Thompson. Again, a trade that everyone and their grandmothers is calling an absolute steal for the Washington Capitals. There were plenty of fans of plenty of different teams who were absolutely flabbergasted and pissed off that that is all it took for Brian MacLellan and the Washington Capitals to land Logan Thompson. The dude has been one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL the last couple of seasons, but more on that later because we've got more moves to get to here. First, Brian MacLellan, he didn't put the phone down all week, it seems like. So, and if you thought that the trade for Logan Thompson was a certified Brian MacLellan fleecing, how about you try this one on for size, okay? Because this one truly shocked the entire hockey world. The Washington Capitals acquire defenseman Jakob Chychrun from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for defenseman Nick Jensen and a third-round pick in 2026. Excuse me, what? Like, what? Are we playing NHL 24 on PlayStation right now? What the fuck is that by the Ottawa Senators general manager? Holy hell. Listen, if you are an NHL general manager, I'm going to give you an invaluable tip right now, okay? Listen closely if you want to keep your job. If Brian motherfucking MacLellan calls you up at your office with a trade proposal, you are allowed to simply hang up the phone, bro. Like, you can just push the end button on the call. It's the little red one that looks like a phone receiver. Or, since a lot of the general managers in the NHL today are about 1,000 years old, if you are still using an actual landline, okay, you too can quite literally hang up the receiver. Now, of course, as a Capitals fan, I don't want you to hang up the phone. I, of course, want you to continue making these trades with us. But my goodness, I'm just saying there is another option other than simply giving Brian MacLellan whatever the hell he asks for on the first go. Like, this is insanity. My God, just hang up the phone, bro. Why do this to yourself? Like I said, as a Capitals fan, I love it. But as a human being who doesn't want to see people lose their jobs, okay? It's a little like watching a three-legged puppy hobble around on one of those roller cart thingies. Like, it just breaks your heart. All right, so I just had to get that off my chest, seriously, because some of these trades that Brian MacLellan pulls off, you really just wonder, like, what does he have on these other general managers, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense how he can get these other general managers, these gentlemen who, many of whom have held these positions for a long time, have a lot of experience. How does he get him to agree to these things? So, the Caps, like I said, they get Jakob Chychrun. They rid themselves of Nick Jensen's contract in the process. That is a huge win for the Caps in every aspect that you can win. And that was it, for the trades at least. Up until this point. That was it on the trade front. We will see what happens the rest of the offseason for the Caps, but that's already a whopping 4 trades that they have completed already this offseason, which obviously is not insignificant. And then there was still much, much more to come for the Caps once free agency opened as well. As, oh yes, baby, Brian MacLellan, like I said, he is not putting that phone down just yet. He still had a lot more up his sleeve that he wanted to get accomplished. And accomplish it he did, as on the opening day of free agency, he gets deals done with Matt Roy, Brandon Duhaime, and Taylor Raddysh. And now, like, Matt Roy, widely considered to be one of the best and most coveted as well, defenseman on the free agent market this season. He signs what I think is a very reasonable deal with our Washington Capitals, 6 years at $5.75 million per season. And we will get into what he'll bring to the team in just a second here. Brandon Duhaime, his is a 2-year contract at $1.85 million per season, and Taylor Raddysh a 1-year, $1 million contract for him. So let's get into what these new players are going to bring to the Caps in terms of their on-ice abilities, shall we? This is going to be fun because these are good players that the Caps have picked up, like I said, so I'm excited to talk about this. And like I mentioned earlier, in today's episode, we are covering everything after the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, because like I said, we already did a whole Pierre-Luc Dubois episode in our last episode, and so if you do want to hear about Pierre-Luc Dubois and what he is going to bring, you can find that previous episode in our podcast feed just before this episode here, and so that will be episode number 88 that you are looking for if you want Pierre-Luc Dubois content. But for today's show, like I said, it is Andrew Mangiapane, it is Logan Thompson, it is Jakob Chychrun, it is Matt Roy, it is Brandon Duhaime, and it is Taylor Raddysh. So, aside from, like I said, adding a top 6 center in Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Caps go out and they add another top 6 forward in Andrew Mangiapane. So Mangiapane, he is 28 years old. He scored 35 goals for the Calgary Flames a couple of seasons ago, so he is definitely capable of putting the puck in the net. And also, as someone who lives in Canada and who pays attention to the Canadian teams, right? I have watched a lot of Calgary Flames games. I used to live in Calgary, actually. I went to university there. And so Mangiapane, just as an observer of that team, like I'm not a mega fan of the Calgary Flames or anything like that, but I have, like I said, watched quite a few of their games. And so I've been, kind of probably, like I've seen more games than most people will have of the Calgary Flames. Let's just say that. So by observing them and not really having any type of, real fan investment in them, Mangiapane, to me, just something that I've noticed is that he also has this really special knack for scoring the big goal at the big time. Like, he's just one of those players, right? He just always seems to be that guy that when you're in a moment where you need a big goal, he always seems to be the one who's stepping up to the plate, the one who's scoring it for you. So I have always really liked that about Mangiapane and about his game. Like I said, just as an outside observer of the Calgary Flames, where he had played, of course, all of his NHL career up until this point. And he's also been a plus player every single season of his career, outside of just one 10-game stint during his rookie season. And that does include last season on last season's Calgary Flames, which, is honestly damn impressive by him managing to be a plus player on that team, because last season's Calgary Flames team was awful. Like, they were not good. And Mangiapane was still a +7 last season. So that's a little bit miraculous, if you ask me, on that team. So good for him. And then Logan Thompson, moving along to him, Logan Thompson, like I said, he has been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL the last couple of seasons, numbers-wise, which, explains, obviously, why everybody and their grandmothers, like I said, wanted this guy. I would expect that, with how good Charlie Lindgren was for the Caps last season, and he, of course, got them to the Stanley Cup playoffs, somewhere that no one outside of Washington thought that they would be. So I would expect that it will be Chucky's net to lose heading into the season. But it is definitely comforting to know that, should Chuck stumble at any point or get injured or anything like that, that the Caps now also have a very capable number 2 waiting in the wings in Logan Thompson, something that they frankly did not have last season with Darcy Kemper. And it's for that reason that I could definitely see Logan Thompson, getting a lot more starts than Darcy Kemper did down the stretch last season, so that even if it is Charlie Lindgren's net, right, this means that Chucky won't be completely burned out this time around come playoff time. That obviously was a problem last season. He had to play way too much down the stretch. So, that would be a huge benefit for the Caps, frankly, being able to split the starts a bit more, or at least not having to start Chuck like I said, every single game down the stretch, letting him get some rest, so that he still has something left in the tank come playoff time. And by the way, for what it's worth, as much as I love Charlie Lindgren, and I'm obviously a big Charlie Lindgren fan, I love the guy, I love him on and off of the ice, but I do think that the Caps are being rather smart here by not signing him to a contract extension right away, not getting trigger happy with it, right? As for right now, up to this point, he still has only done it for one full year here, right? Like this past season was, the first time that he's really gotten a starter's workload, a starter's amount of games. And obviously he did very well with it. I'm not saying he didn't. Obviously he did. But it was still only just the first time around the block for him, if you know what I mean. So I do think, like I said, that the Caps are being smart here. They can afford to kind of wait this one out, to wait another season on this and kind of wait and see, and just make sure that last season wasn't just a one-off for Chucky. And, if it turns out that it was a one-off, then I think that they have gotten themselves, like I said, a really, really nice insurance policy here in Logan Thompson, who has already proven, obviously, that he is a very good NHL goaltender as well. So the season won't go down the toilet for the Caps if Chucky isn't playing well. And again, that was not the case with this Caps team last season when Darcy Kemper was the other option. The Caps were completely sunk if Charlie Lindgren wasn't going to play well. So it's a great move. And by the way, I do think that Logan Thompson is going to push Charlie Lindgren for starts. I do think, like I said, that, based on Chucky's performance last season, that it is going to be his net coming into training camp. And I don't think his teammates would have it in any other way, quite frankly, after the way that he played for them last season. They're going to want it to be his net coming in. He has earned that, certainly, but I do think that that Logan Thompson is not your typical backup goaltender. Like, he's good enough to be a starter. And so I would expect him to push Charlie Lindgren for starts, which is a good problem to have if you're the Caps, by the way, right? Like, having two guys who are starter quality, that's a really nice problem to have. It should be a really nice, healthy competition that pushes everybody to be their best every night, and ensures that no one, like I said, plays too many games, especially down the stretch, and keeps everybody fresh for the most important time of the season. That was, like I alluded to, a massive problem for the Caps last season, was just how much they had to overplay Charlie Lindgren down the stretch. I believe he started, I think it was like 20 of the Caps' last 22 games of the season or something like that, right? Or 19 of the last 21, something like that. He could not get a night off because Darcy Kemper was so unreliable. So it was a big problem for the Caps. You could see that once they made it to the playoffs, on the back of Chucky Lindgren, that he was just burned out, right? He had played way too much, like I said, down the stretch, and he had nothing left for the playoffs. So it was a big problem last season that hopefully will not be a problem at all moving forward this season. All right, moving on. I just love to talk about goalies. You guys know that I'm a goalie, and so I can get carried away when talking about goaltending sometimes. But let's move on now to Jakob Chychrun. Jakob Chychrun, one of the absolutely most coveted players at recent trade deadlines. This guy is a bona fide top four defenseman. He is still just 26 years old, so he fits right in with the Caps' whole younger and faster plan that they are doing a phenomenal job of bringing to life, by the way, over these last 18 months or so. Seriously, what a turnaround. Like, I saw a stat the other day that the Caps, of course, like, they've been either a top 3 or a top 5, oldest roster in the National Hockey League heading into these past 2 seasons, last season and the season before that one. But this season, if you look at their roster heading into this season, if you assume that obviously Nicklas Backstrom will not be on the active roster, he's going back to long-term injured reserve, and if you assume the same, which I think is probably pretty safe to assume at this point, if you assume the same for TJ Oshie as well, the Caps are a top 10 now youngest roster in the entire National Hockey League. So it's been a hell of a turnaround here. But yeah, Jakob Chychrun, he's still, like I said, just 26 years old, and yet he has already played a ton of NHL hockey games for someone of that young age. He's got almost 500 games of NHL experience already. So he is what you would call a young veteran, right? And he is a big dude. He's a big dude who brings quite a bit of offense to the table from the back end as well, which is something obviously that the Caps have been missing these last couple of seasons, outside of John Carlson. So Chychrun, he should help a lot in that regard. And actually, even on a very shitty Ottawa Senators team, Chychrun still managed to put up 41 points last season, which sadly would have been good enough for 4th in scoring on last season's Caps team. But we made the playoffs, so I am allowed to make fun of the Senators, right? But yeah, Dylan Strome had 67 points. A 38-year-old Alex Ovechkin had 65 points. And John Carlson from the back end had 52 points. So Chychrun, on last season's Caps team, he would have been 4th in scoring on that team. And honestly, that was a big problem with the offense last season, was that, during the half of the game that John Carlson could not play, because you can't literally have him out there for 60 minutes, right? Although I am sure that they would love to. But during the half of every game that John Carlson couldn't play, there simply wasn't anybody out there on the back end who was getting the puck into the hands of the forwards in good spots and with consistency. And so that definitely, it wasn't all on the forwards there, right? Would you like the forwards to put the puck in the net more? Yeah, absolutely. But you need to have the puck on your stick first in order to put it into the net, right? So Jakob Chychrun should help with that, definitely. And yeah, Chychrun scored 14 goals again last season, which is obviously a lot for a defenseman. And he scored 18 goals in just 56 games a couple of seasons ago as well. So we all know how great John Carlson is offensively, for comparison's sake, right? John Carlson's single season career high in goals is 17. Granted, he was on pace for 20 or more on a few different occasions when his season was cut short for different reasons. Most recently, of course, when his former teammate, Brendan Dillon, accidentally blew his ear off with a puck. He was on pace for 20 goals that season, which was the season before this last one. But still, you can see my point, right? John Carlson is one of the very best offensive defensemen in the entire NHL. I don't think anyone would argue that. And, he has been that for many, many years running now. And his single season career high in goals, like I said, is 17. So when you're talking about 18 goals in only 56 games for a defenseman in the National Hockey League, that is a lot. Not a lot of guys have put up numbers like that, and Jakob Chychrun is one of the few guys who have. So that should show you right off the bat just how talented Chychrun is offensively. And yeah, what else can I say here, really? He's got a cannon of a shot. He's a great skater, great in transition, makes a great first pass out of the D zone, all of those things. He should really help in a lot of areas, is what I'm trying to say. So a great pickup for Brian MacLellan and the Washington Capitals there. And then moving right along, you look at Matt Roy. So you add Chychrun as a left shot top 4 D-man, right? And now you add Roy as a right shot top 4 D-man. And now you are really cooking with gas, baby. Honestly, it cannot be overstated how much insanely better the Caps defensive group just got over these last couple of weeks. It's actual lunacy, frankly. Brian MacLellan should be arrested. Matt Roy, in case you don't know, as he has been in the Western Conference and Western Time Zone, so a lot of people, won't have watched him a lot, but there is a reason why so many teams wanted this guy. There's a reason why he was so highly coveted in free agency. And actually there are several reasons, but let's start with the big one, okay? So first of all, no question, he is absolutely one of the very best shutdown defensemen in the entire National Hockey League right now. Look at the guy's metrics the last several seasons in a row now. There is absolutely nothing happening offensively for the opposition when he is on the ice. Nothing. Zilch. Nil. Nada. You can say it in any language that you like. There are still 0 goals being scored for the opposition when he is on the ice. Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson are going to absolutely love this guy. Secondly, he's physical. He hits like a truck, which we love here. And he is just an all-around great, reliable defenseman who doesn't make any mistakes, who does everything well, and who makes everyone around him better. So he's, again, just like Chychrun, a great puck mover, getting the puck into the hands of the forwards with a great first pass out of the D zone, something that, like I said, the Caps really, really needed last season whenever John Carlson was not on the ice. And so he should just really, really, really help the Caps in several areas that, like I said, they needed it. And Nick Jensen, while he was a great soldier here, no doubt about it, but his game is definitely and clearly on the decline, right? I don't like saying that about him because, like I said, he has been a very good soldier here, a great soldier here. But yeah, his game is on the decline. He is really starting to show his age. And it was just time to move on, frankly. So Matt Roy is a massive, massive upgrade over Nick Jensen. There's no two ways about it. And Matt Roy, by the way, would be a massive upgrade over pretty much anyone in the entire league defensively. So there's that, right? So sorry that you have to go to the Senators organization, Nick Jensen. It sucks. But, just like I'm sorry that Beck Mallenstein has to go to the Sabres organization. But as they say, business is just business. Okay. Lastly, we are rolling right along here. Brandon Duhaime and Taylor Raddysh. Now, Brandon Duhaime is a lock for your fourth line. He is the quintessential perfect fourth line player, actually. If they were making NHL fourth liners in a lab, Brandon Duhaime is what they would come up with. He is big. He is strong. He is mean. He hits like a fucking Mack truck, and he hits frequently. He is certainly not afraid of dropping the gloves either, and he is very, very good at it. I certainly do not recommend challenging him to a round of fisticuffs. But yeah, and he's fast. He's a fast skater. He's very responsible defensively, and he is a great penalty killer as well. He's basically everything that Beck Mallenstein and Garnet Hathaway before him as well, for that matter, were for the Caps, right? And somehow the Caps just keep on finding these perfect fourth liners. The Caps have had one of the best fourth lines in the entire NHL in every season now, going back several years now. And there has been some turnover there in terms of the personnel, but somehow, like I said, they just keep on finding these players who are actually a lot harder to find than you might think. Just ask a lot of teams around the league who are looking for these types of guys. But yeah, Brandon Duhaime is another great pickup for the Washington Capitals. I was able to, I have watched him quite a lot when he was with the Minnesota Wild. So he's a player that I've always really, really liked. So happy to see our Capitals picking him up. And then Taylor Raddysh is a really, really interesting one. Mostly because you could pretty easily picture him and pencil him in on that fourth line, because he can definitely play that style of game. But his ceiling as a player is actually quite a lot higher than that, quite frankly. He's another guy who is still just 26 years old. He was a second round pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning just 8 short years ago in 2016. The Tampa Bay Lightning, who just like our very own Washington Capitals, are a notoriously good drafting team. And they obviously saw something in him that was high end enough to make them draft him in the second round. And sure enough, when you look at his numbers in the NHL, he's got a 20-goal season already at age 26, which is nothing to sneeze at, obviously. And he did that with the lowly Chicago Blackhawks, the pre-Connor Bedard Blackhawks at that, I might add. So that Chicago Blackhawks team, they were trying to be bad. They were trying to suck. And Taylor Raddysh still put up 20 goals with them. So I believe Dylan Strome was his center for part of his time in Chicago as well, by the way. So that could be something to watch for. I'm sure Brian MacLellan already thought of that. I'm sure he's way ahead of me with that one. But yeah, I would bet that Brian MacLellan, Spencer Carberry, and the entire Cap staff is probably thinking that there's a lot more to unlock there with Taylor Raddysh offensively. And even if you can't unlock it for whatever reason, worst case scenario is you got yourselves another very useful, very capable bottom six forward who you are paying virtually no money and who isn't going to hurt you at all defensively. And he's another big guy too. So even if he doesn't score, at least he's bringing some more size to your lineup. Not that the Caps really need any help in that department. They're still a pretty big team that everyone says is tough to play against, which is one of my absolute favorite compliments, by the way. Tough to play against. You love to hear that about your favorite team. But yeah, can you see a theme with all of these Capitals additions here? Like, they are all young. In fact, every single player that the Caps have added is under 30 years of age. The oldest being Matt Roy, who just turned 29. Most of them are around that 25 to 26 age range. They're all big, with the exception of Andrew Mangiapane, who plays a big game. Like, he plays big in the same way that a TJ Oshie plays big, right? Oshie's obviously not a big guy, but you would not know it by watching him play. And Mangiapane is the exact same way. They're all fast. They all play a physical brand, and they can all move the puck. So those should all give us some pretty good hints as to what style of game that MacLellan, Carbery, and the rest of the staff want the team to get to moving forward. I think they played a certain style of game last season kind of out of necessity, like because they didn't necessarily have the horses in certain areas to play any other type of way. So they made that style work for them, and they committed to it, and they made the playoffs with it, right? But I think that with the upgrades that they've made to their lineup this offseason, we are going to see the coaching staff utilize those upgrades big time to play a more, up-tempo, in-your-face brand of hockey. Something that you will remember, Spencer Carbery did say was his preferred style of play for his teams when he came on board. But he also said that the construction of the roster and the players that he had available to him would ultimately dictate which style the team would play. I think they kind of started off last season trying to play that up-tempo game, and it wasn't really working for the roster the way that it was constructed. And so Spencer Carbery and his coaching staff, to their major credit, they were able to pivot about halfway through the season and implement kind of a different style of play that would work better for that particular roster. And they were able to implement it to where obviously all of the players bought in, everybody was doing their jobs out there, and they, like I said, they made the playoffs playing that style. So great for them. That's a huge credit to not only to the coaching staff, but also to the players as well for buying into that. But I think that is exactly what we saw last season with the Caps. Like I said, is that Carbery just kind of took what was available to him, and he essentially made lemonade out of lemons, right? But he is going to have a much better roster to work with this upcoming season. And so I do expect their style of play to change a bit now that they have a better roster, more fit, like I said, to play more of an up-tempo style of game. And so I'm definitely very excited to see what Spencer Carbery and his staff can do with this roster, right? Any way you slice it, the Caps right now, when compared to the roster that they took into the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Rangers, so much better, right? Like, they are better and deeper up front, for sure. They are better and deeper on the back end, for sure. And they are better and deeper in goal as well. Obviously, shipping out Darcy Kemper and bringing in Logan Thompson. So massive upgrades at every position. And they somewhat inexplicably, on behalf of the rest of the league here, we're able to add all of this while literally barely giving up anything at all. They didn't give up any prospects. They didn't give up any first-round picks. They only gave up but a single second-round pick even. All of the other picks were in the third round or later. And we really aren't going to miss any of those picks anyway, because we had too many picks than what we could even use for ourselves, thanks to having maximized value on our expiring unrestricted free agents at the past two trade deadlines. So yeah, I mean, this is what you call great asset management by Brian MacLellan and the rest of the Capitals front office. And yeah, I mean, we made the playoffs last season, and all we have lost here from that roster is Darcy Kemper, boo-hoo, right? Nick Jensen, Beck Mallenstein, but with the context that you got Cole Hudson for Beck Mallenstein, unbelievable. Max Pacioretty and Nicholas Aube-Kubel. So respectfully, no disrespect to any of those guys, but Brian MacLellan, you beautiful, fantastical son of a bitch, take a bow, please. You have earned it. You are playing this league on video game mode while the rest of the general managers trample each other for scraps from the scrap pile. Incredible work by Brian MacLellan and the rest of his staff. But yeah, I mean, that is just insane when you look at not only the haul that the Caps just brought in, but also just as importantly at how absurdly little, like I said, it cost them to bring in that haul. Like Looney Tunes. All right, Caps fans, just checking the time here. We are running long here on today's episode, but hey, don't blame me. Blame Brian MacLellan because there's just so many moves to talk about here. But we are going to wrap it up here soon. But first, I just wanted to quickly touch on a couple of other things here. And I was actually going to talk about this more at length. That was the original plan. But we are, like I said, running long here now. So I'll just keep it to kind of the Cliff Notes version, if you will. The Caps front office staff. So basically the gist of it, all that you need to know is that a couple of familiar faces have got new titles here. So first off, we don't call Brian MacLellan the general manager anymore. He is now the president of hockey operations, which is really just a fancy way of saying that he is in charge. And Brian MacLellan has promoted Chris Patrick to the title of general manager. Chris Patrick, of course, who is a longtime member of the staff. All told, he's worked for the organization for a total of 16 years now in all different roles. Including most recently as Brian MacLellan's associate general manager. And even before that, he was Brian MacLellan's assistant general manager before MacLellan promoted him to associate general manager. So for those who, pay a lot of attention to the stuff off of the ice as much as the stuff on the ice, and I don't expect, by the way, the average fan who just wants to enjoy the hockey to be paying this much attention to all of this off-ice stuff. But I did say it last year that the writing was pretty much already on the wall, that this was going to be the case, that Chris Patrick was going to be promoted to general manager eventually, and that Brian MacLellan would stay on at the higher role of president. And the reason why I said that a year ago was because they had promoted Mac to be the president, and at the same time they had promoted Chris Patrick from assistant general manager, like I said, to associate general manager. So that was a big clue for us because, first of all, it's promotions for both guys. So obviously they're both doing a pretty bang up job to get promoted, get more responsibility, bigger paychecks, et cetera. And it also said, abundantly clearly that the organization wanted to keep both of them. And also, specifically with Chris Patrick's promotion from assistant GM to associate GM, that made it pretty clear that he was the guy who Brian MacLellan and the whole organization here trusts and wanted to train up going forward for the duties of when he would eventually take over as the general manager. And we have to remember, by the way, I know he doesn't look it, but we do have to remember that Brian MacLellan is going to turn 66 years old this year. So he has been doing the general manager job for us for the past 10 years now. And actually for the past year, he has been doing both jobs, general manager and president, right? And so you would have to imagine, my point is that you would have to imagine that he probably, understandably, is ready to scale back his day-to-day, and deservedly so, frankly. So basically, all you really need to know as fans about the situation is that Brian MacLellan is still here and will still be very, very much involved. In fact, as the general manager, Chris Patrick will report directly to Brian MacLellan, and MacLellan, they've said, will have the final say on things, presumably like trades and things like that. It's just that Chris Patrick will take a lot of the day-to-day bullshit, right, that you have to do as the GM. He will take that off of Brian MacLellan's plate. So, frankly, it's a well-earned promotion for both guys. And this is the way that a lot of NHL franchises are doing business nowadays. or at least, the NHL franchises that have money and the owner doesn't mind spending it, because NHL organizations have gotten to be so big, and there's so much involved with it nowadays that it is a heck of a lot more efficient if you have multiple people. It just is. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the highest revenue organization in the league, right? They do it this way with Brendan Shanahan in place as the president. My hometown, Vancouver Canucks as well. They do it this way with Jim Rutherford in place as the president, and Patrick Allvin now as his GM. The NHL has changed a lot in this modern day and age to where it is now the president positions that are, the coveted positions around the league, because it's all of the power without having to do all of that daily legwork that you do as a general manager. So everyone knows that it is the president who's really in charge of what a team's going to do. But nowadays in the modern NHL, the general manager is essentially the president's underling, and the president gets to kick back and say, hey, go make some calls, get me a top 6 forward, get me a top 4 defenseman. You go do all of that legwork. I will sit here, I will kick back, and I will have the final say when you bring me a trade, and I will say yes or no, right? So it's a pretty sweet gig, and Brian MacLellan, like I said, has definitely earned that promotion with his sparkling work over the past 10 years. Did you know that as he hands over the GM role to Chris Patrick, he does so having racked up the 3rd best record of any general manager all time in NHL history who has held the post for at least 500 NHL games. Like, that is absolutely insane, you guys. The 3rd winningest GM of all time in NHL history. I just wanted to say that again because some folks, I feel, don't give him enough credit for all that he's done here. I'm just saying. But yeah, 3rd winningest general manager of all time in NHL history. That is crazy stuff. So anyways, if you remember, Brian MacLellan was also our assistant general manager first before becoming our general manager. And that certainly turned out okay, didn't it? So it's all good. He's still going to be here. He's still going to be in charge. But like I said, a well-earned promotion for him and a well-earned promotion for Chris Patrick as well. So congratulations to both gentlemen. Anyways, I had a few more things to talk about, believe it or not, but we are really running long now. So I will save those for another episode another time. I'm sure you guys have places to go and people to see here. So for now, Caps fans, I would like to thank you all again so much from the bottom of my heart for listening. It has been a pleasure, as always, babes, an absolute pleasure. Please do not forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so. We appreciate it so, so much. Thank you guys again. Until next time, babes. And as always, let's go Caps, baby.